Dear students, welcome you all to the course Circular Knitting Technology. So, in the previous sessions, we have discussed about the classification of knitting technologies or classification of knitting machines based on various categories. And as well as we have seen that what are the components in the single jersey or in the case of like a small diameter, medium diameter and large diameter circular knitting machines. As well as in the last topic in the first unit, we have seen that the main components in the single jersey or single bed weft knitting machines. So today's session we are going to discuss about the main components of double bed circular weft knitting machines. So let us see that what are the different types of double bed knitting machines are there, what are the main components of it, and how exactly these double bed knitting machines are going to be worked in the circular knitting technology. So let us start the first element or first main component in the case of double bed circular knitting machines. So as we have seen in the previous sessions, the classification of circular knitting machines are classified the knitting machines as per the number of beds we are using. So specifically we are discussing in this particular session what are the different components present in the case of double bed circular weft knitting machines. Okay, so first component in the double bed is double bed, nothing but two needle beds are available in the knitting machine. So two needle beds, one of the needle bed in the double bed weft knitting machine is called as, that is, cylinder. So in the classification we have seen that the two needle beds that are like the cylinder and dial case, and the second one is called as two cylinder knitting machines. So circular knitting machines are classified into single cylinder circular knitting machines, double cylinder circular knitting machines, and the third category, that is cylinder and dial category. So we will see these particularly two beds, that is cylinder and dial circular knitting machine, and the second category, that is double cylinder circular knitting machines. Okay, so we will see what are the major components and what are the fabric formation, what is the procedure of fabric forming in the two bed or double bed weft knitting machines we will see in this particular session. So the first main component in case of cylinder and dial case, that is cylinder. Okay, and even in the double cylinder case also the same cylinder will be there, but there are differences in the components. So particularly we will discuss in the further slides, that is double cylinder category. Now in the single, that is cylinder and dial category, that is cylinder needle bed and dial needle bed category, we will see that what is exactly the cylinder is. So the cylinder is a circular steel bed having grooves or trikes or cuts or slots to accommodate the needles in the particular grooves. Okay, so the needles are going to be moved up and down in the cylinder, particularly outer periphery of the cylinder. So the grooves are projected towards the outside periphery of the cylinder. So in each and every groove we are going to accommodate one needle. Okay, so the needle is going to be operated up and down by the help of cams, Now in the cylinder and dial case or in the cylinder and dial category, now the cylinder bed and the dial beds are rotatable one, and the cams which are present in the double bed weft knitting machines are stationary. So the cams are stationary, cylinder and dial is going to be rotated or drive by using the particular driving mechanism. Okay, so the needle beds in the cylinder and dial is going to be rotated and the cams are stationary. Okay, and the cams are stationary. Now, with the reference to the trikes, the needle move vertically up and down, that is I told earlier. So, their butts are going to be followed in the cam tracks. Okay, so now the cylinder is rotating. So, in the side, in the outer periphery of the cylinder, we have a needles. So, the needle butts are projected outside the periphery of the cylinder. So, the projected outside, the needle butts are going to be projected outside, and the cams are going to be fixed into the needle butts. So, the needle butts are going to be followed in the cam track. Okay. So, the cam tracks or the stitch formation is specifically going to be occurred with the help of cam. So, there are different types of cams like the knit cams, tuck cam and miss cams we are using to get a desired quality of the garment, or particularly the desired quality of the knitted fabric. Okay, so the structure of the fabric is going to be depends upon the type of cams we are using and the particular pattern of the cams we are using in the cylinder bed as well as the dial beds. Okay, so the diameter of the cylinder also varied based on the type and the width of the fabric we required. Okay, and the maximum diameter of the cylinder, presently we have a dia of 48 inches, that is a large diameter circular knitting machines we have discussed in the previous session. So the maximum diameter of the cylinder is approximately 48 inches. Okay, and I told the gauge of the knitting machine, so we can have a gauge of like 30 to 35. So the 30 to 35 is the maximum gauge, and nowadays we have increased the gauge also. So 30, nothing but 30 number of needles per 1 inch is there. Nothing but 30 number of slots are present in the cylinder. So each and every slot, one needle is going to be accommodated. So in 1 inch all 30 grooves are there, 30 needles will be accommodated in the cylinder. So the second part in the cylinder and dial case, that is dial. So cylinder and dial. So cylinder is one needle bed, the second needle bed is called as a dial. Okay, so the cylinder is like a circular cylinder. So circular metallic steel metallic body where the cylinder is having the trikes into the outer periphery of the steel cylinder. Okay, and in that particular outer periphery of the trikes we are going to accommodate the needles. Now the dial is going to be having at the top side of the cylinder. Now the dial is a upper steel bed used in double knitting machines or double jersey weft knitting machines. Okay, so dial is called as the upper steel bed. So there is a cylinder, and the top side of the cylinder we have a different dial type of needle bed. So this dial type of needle bed is going to be used as a second needle bed. Now into the grooves of the dial, the needles are mounted horizontally. Now it is like a plate, steel plate like structure, and which is having the grooves. So the needles are going to be projected outside from the dial case, and it is going to be placed horizontally. So now in the cylinder, so the needles are going to be arranged or fixed in the grooves of cylinder in the vertical manner, and in case of dial, the needles are going to be kept in the horizontal manner. Okay, now the number of grooves per unit space conforms with the cylinder gauge is the most of the cases. Simple, like a similar kind of gauge is going to be used for the good running and good quality of the fabric production. And you can observe that I have shown here the two images. One is called as a cylinder and the second one is called as the dial. Now you can see that the cylinder is having a grooves of the outer periphery of the steel bed. So the steel bed which is having the grooves outer periphery, and you can observe that the dial is having like a plate kind of structure, and where the grooves are there in the throughout the plate circumference, and the needles are going to be placed horizontally in the grooves of dial. And you can observe that these are the actual images of dial, where in the normal, like a simple small diameter double bed knitting machines, like these kind of dials are going to be used, and you can observe that there are slots present in the steel bed, that is dial, and you can observe that the needles are projected, or needles are placed horizontally on the dial, and needle butts are going to be projected from the steel bed to the upside. Nothing but there is a dial and the needle butts are going to be projected on the top side of the dial. Okay, so that what will happen, we are going to mount the cams on the top of these needle butts, so that while rotation of the dial, so the dial, in the dial needles, the needles butts are going to be followed in the particular cam track. Okay, so this is how the dial needle beds are available. Now you can observe closely the image of dial and the needles which are placed in the dial case. Okay, and the third important component is needle. As we have already discussed needles, what are the types of needles we are using in the circular weft knitting machine? Only one type, that is latch needle. So nowadays everyone is using the latch needles for the production of single jersey fabrics or double jersey fabrics. So the double jersey fabrics nothing but rib and interlock structures or structural fabrics. Okay, then what is the needle? So the hooked metal needle is the principal knitting element of the knitting machine, and prior to the yarn feeding, the needle is raised to clear the old loop from the hook and to receive the new loop above it's on the new stem. So this is like how we are clearing the old loop from the latch and the stem latch of the needle, and how we are feeding the yarn, and after feeding the knocking over, so that through the old loop the new loop is going to be formed. Okay, so the new loop is then enclosed in the needle hook. As the needle starts to descend, the hook then draws the new loop down through the old loop, as the lateral slides over the outside of the descending bridge of the closed loop. So the loop formation sequence is similar as we have discussed in the previous sessions. Okay, so the loop formation of latch needle is same for the in case of two bed knitting machines. Nothing but two bed, double bed knitting machines, nothing but single jersey knitting machines is single bed knitting machine, and double bed knitting machines that are cylinder and dial case. Okay, so in the cylinder and dial case and single jersey knitting machines, the same kind of latch needle is going to be used to produce the single jersey fabrics as well as the double jersey fabrics. Okay, so don't remember, the latch needle is going to be used for the case of single jersey as well as double jersey, that is cylinder and dial category. Okay, and these are the types of needles or the different sizes of the needles which we are using into the production of double jersey fabrics in the double bed, that is cylinder and dial case. Okay, and this is how the needle is going to be mount on the cylinder. Okay, so already we have seen that in the previous sessions, and you can see here the clear image of the double bed knitting machines. So there are two beds, one is cylinder bed, okay, and the second one is, that is horizontally placed one, is called as dial bed. Now as I told earlier, there is a needle in the cylinder. The needle butt is projected outside to the periphery of the cylinder, and now the needle butt is going to follow the cam tracks which we have kept against the needle butt. So the cam track, whatever it is shown in the image, so similar cam track, so in this cam track the needle is going to be followed, so that the rising up of the needle and lowering down of the needle can be occur. Okay, how it is rising up and how the needle is going to be lower down. So now consider and assume your cylinder is rotating. Your cylinder is rotating. So once the cylinder is rotating, in the cylinder grooves we have a needles. So along with the cylinder, the needles are going to be rotated, and now the needle butt is going to be followed in the track of cam. So whatever the track of the cam is available, if it is having straight track, so the needle will not rise up or lower down. Okay, so it will run in the cam track. Okay, then if we have a knit kind of cam, so in that category the needle is going to be raised up once your cylinder is rotating. So along with the cylinder, the needle is also going to be rotated, so that the needle is going to clear the old loop, then feeding can be occur, then the new loop is going to be formed through the old loop. Okay, so this is how it is going to be happen. Now you need to think about, you need to understand what is exactly the movement of the needle is. Needle in the cylinder is rising up and lowering down. Okay, and in the case of dial needles, needles are moving forward and backward. So because the needles in the dial has placed in the horizontal manner. Okay, so in the horizontal manner, the dial needles are going to be kept, so that the needles are going to be moved forward and the backward. So once it is following the cam tracks of dial. Okay, cams for dial is different, cams for cylinder is different. Okay, so there are two complete sets of needles, cams are available in the cylinder and dial case. This is the one example, and you can observe that there is a feed guide, yarn feed guide, where it is placed near to the two needles, so that once it is cleared, when we are descending the needle, starting to descending the needle, that time the yarn is going to be fed, so that the loop formation can be occurred from the both the braids. Okay, so there is a possibility we can make two different types of fabrics by using cylinder and dial category. Okay, so those are rib structures, and the second one is called as interlock structures. Okay, so you can see here the image shows that the cylinder cams tracks and the dial cam tracks. You can observe that the cam tracks are different. This is specifically like multi cam track system, which I have shown in the image. So we will discuss in the further class what is exactly the multi cam track systems are, and what is exactly multi butt positions or multi butt levels are there in the next sessions. Okay, so this is what the cams are going to be used in the case of cylinder and dial category. And you can observe that the same thing here. Okay, so the cams are shown like knit cams, mist cams are used, and few places where we can use the tuck cams, where these usage of cams are going to be completely depends upon the type of fabric structure we would like to manufacture. Okay, so now we will see that what is exactly the rib structures are, how we can make the rib structures. Okay, now you can have a doubt on, you can have a small doubt on, like if we have a two needle beds, like one is called as the cylinder needles and the second one is called as the dial needles, if we have arranged in the same path, if you can observe that my finger, so if we have arranged in the same manner or same path, now once we rise up needles from the cylinder and once we move forward the cylinders, then what will happen? So there is a clashing or there is a damage of needles can occur if these two are arranged in the same area or same position, same axis. Okay, so that is why there is a different rising up and the different operating of needles are available. Now to get the rib kind of structure, what is the rib structure is? Rib structure is nothing but we can produce the fabric. The fabric is having alternative veils. Alternative veils is having face loops. Alternative veils are having face loops. So alternative veil nothing but 1, 3, 5, 7 like that. All, if you can observe the loops, alternative veils are going to be loops like a face loops. Okay. So now you can able to produce the 2 into 1 rib also, 2 into 2 rib also. Okay, so that we will discuss what is rib structures are. Now you can observe the image which I have shown here. So the needle beds are, or needles in the needle beds are arranged in the staggered in position. Nothing but, so say for example these 2 fingers are the needles of a cylinder, and the needles are not going to kept in the same axis. It is going to be kept at the middle of the needle. Now what will happen if you forward the needle of the dial and if you rise up the needles of cylinder, so there is no clash. So what will happen? In between the needles, these needles are going to be raised up so that we are feeding the yarn. So there is no possibility of clashing or damage of needles can occur. Okay. So at a time, the cylinder needles as well as the dial needles are going to be operated to manufacture the rib kind of structures. Now for example, so as I shown here, you can observe that the face loop of cylinder is shown, the first one, and the dial, if you can observe in the dial, it is showing that the face side, from the dial side you can see that from the dial side, if you can see, the face loops are going to be occur. So in any category, from the cylinder side as well as from the dial side, you can observe the face loops on the both the sides. So if you have a 1 into 1 rib structure, if you rotate the fabric from face to back to face, so it can appear the same appearance. So particularly 1 into 1 rib category only, 1 into 1 rib category. And you can observe that like 2 into 2, equal number of categories, 2 into 2, 3 into 3, 4 into 4. So these categories only, the fabric will appear in the same manner from the face side to the back side. If you have 2 into 1 rib, now you are producing the 2 loops from the cylinder, face loops, and 1 loop from the back. So 2 into 1 rib kind of structures. So you are leaving 1 needle so that you can able to produce the 2 into 1 rib kind of structures. 2 from cylinder, 1 from dial. 2 from cylinder, 1 from dial, like that. Or 2 for dial, 1 from cylinder. So in that, the usage of the needles, you can produce the rib kind of structures. So we will see a small animation video of rib structures, how we are going to produce that, to particularly double jersey fabrics. So you can observe that both the needles are rising up. Now yarn is fed to the needles at a time. You can observe that both the needles yarn is fed, and now both are pulling. So the yarn is going to be, the new loop is going to be drawn through the old loops of cylinder as well as the dial. Okay. So this is how the double jersey knitted fabric is going to be manufactured. Now we will have a small look of how the loop transfer can be occur in case of double jersey fabric structure. So where there is a small clip arrangement, without feeding, what will happen is the loop has been transferred from the cylinder needles to the dial needle. This is called as the loop transfer in case of double jersey knitting machines. And you can observe here the next category, that is called as interlock fabrics. How we can manufacture the interlock fabrics. You can observe that there is a small change in the usage of the needles. Okay. So you can observe that all the needles are arranged in the same axis. The axis of the needles cylinder needles and axis of dial needles are same. So nothing but same, it was placed in the same axis. But you need to see that, you need to understand, you need to identify where we have used two different types of needles. Two different types of needles. One is called as long butt needles. Second one is called as short needle. Long needles and short needles. Okay. So long needles and short needles are going to be used for the interlock fabric structure or interlock structures. Okay. So you can observe that. So you can observe that the cylinder is having, first is having the short needle and the long needle, short needle and the long needle. And in front of the short needle of the cylinder, in the dial category, we have a long needle. So if the cylinder is having short needle, in front of the short needle of cylinder, in the dial we have a long needle. And similar, like next one is a long needle is in the cylinder and short needle in the dial. And third, short needle in the cylinder, long needle in the dial. And fourth, long needle in the cylinder, short needle in the dial. So in opposite to the cylinder needles, okay, in the opposite of the cylinder needles, so opposite type of needle is going to be used. Nothing but the small, if you use in the cylinder, long needle is going to be used. Short needle or long needle. Short needle or long needle. Okay, so short and long is the combination in between the cylinder needles as well as the dial needles. So if you operate in the cylinder and the dial, if you want to operate all the short needles, if you want to operate, if you would like to operate all the short needles in the cylinder as well as the dial, you can operate. But all the needles in the cylinder and dial, like short needles as well as the long needles in the cylinder, short needles and long needles in the dial, at a time you cannot able to use, because it will going to damage. Again it is going to be damaged, because these needles are kept or in the position it was made in the same position. So that is why either you need to operate at a time long needles of the cylinder and the long needles of the dial, or short needles of the cylinder or short needles of the dial. So this is the how you are going to produce the interlock fabric structure by using the two needle beds. Now what is happening is, so to operate, to produce the interlock fabric structure, so total completely two courses are going to be, two loops should be followed. Two loops should be formed in the knitting machine. So when we can call one course in the interlock fabric structure is, all short needles in the cylinder and dial was made loops, and in the case of long needles in the cylinder and dial, long needles in the cylinder and dial, then second course is going to be formed. So all together, if you complete all the needles are formed one loop, all the needles are formed in the one loop, so nothing but in the cylinder and the dial all the needles are formed one loop, then you can say that that is one course. One course, because when you look into the interlock fabric structure, the interlock fabric structure is going to look same appearance in the both the sides, in the both the sides. So that is why these fabrics are also called as double faced fabrics. Double faced fabrics. Both the sides it is going to be looks the same. Okay, for your understanding, in the image it was shown the short needles of loops, all the short needles of loops. So cylinder short needles and dial short needles, you can observe that the loops which are shown in the black color, black filled color, and long needles of cylinder and long needles of dial are shown in the simple outer line of the loop. So this is how you are going to manufacture the interlock fabric structure. Interlock fabric structure. So let us see a small animation video on interlock fabric structures. Okay. So now you can observe that the needle beds and the guide, yarn guides which are arranged nearer to the needles when these needles are going to be lower down, in that case it is going to be fed. Now this is how the needles are going to be arranged in the cylinder and dial category. So this is not possible. If you operate all the needles, it is not possible, as I told earlier. Now only alternative needles in the cylinder and dial is possible. So that is why we are using short needles and long needles in the cylinder and dial. Okay. So at a time, either in the short needles in the cylinder and dial or long needles in the cylinder and dial can be operated at a time. Okay. So that you can form the fabric structure. So you can clearly see here how the needles are going to be moved up and down, and in the dial, from the dial, the horizontal movement, to and fro movement of the needles. Now, as I told earlier, like feed 1, you can observe that the short needles and long needles. Feed 1, you can observe that all the long needles of cylinder and long needles of dial is going to be formed loops. And in the feed 2, all the short needles of cylinder and short needles of dial is going to be formed. Okay. And you can see that these two together, we can say that one course. These two together, we can say that it is one course. Okay. And you can see that the structure of the fabric, you can see both the sides it is looking same. Both the sides the face loops are going to be appear. Okay. So tightly constructed. So that is why it is called as a double faced fabrics. Double faced fabrics. So both cylinder loops and dial loops are becoming one course. Okay. So the highlighted part is completely one course. Okay. So that is made by the cylinder and dial. All the needles are made the loops. Now this is overall the knitting machine construction, and after fabric formation the fabric is going to be taken down by using the fabric take-up rollers. And even in the knitting machine you can feed the design, whatever the design you required, or you can prepare separately by using the CAD system. And this is how the fabric is going to be loops on the one side, and the second side, like opposite side of the fabric, also looks same. Okay. So these are the two feeds, and the third and fourth, either only cylinder needles or all cylinder needles are rising, and in the fourth case all the dial needles are rising. All the dial needles are coming forward and feeding the yarn. Okay, this is also possible. Okay, so this is how the fabric construction is going to be happen for particularly interlock fabrics. Okay, now what is the next element or next component in the double bed circular weft knitting machines are, that is fabric spreader. So why we are using the spreader? The tubular fabrics are going to be taken down, okay, so that when we are taking down, the fabric should not have any crease formation or wrinkles while it is winding into the cloth roller. So the crease marks and wrinkle marks or stitch deformations are going to be prevented by using the fabric spreader. So evenly the fabric is going to be spread, or under tension the fabric is going to be wound. Under tension nothing but not too much tension. Under a optimal tension it is going to be spread and it is going to be wound into the fabric cloth roller. Okay, so this is how the fabric is going to be spread. This is the small thing or mechanical part which is there inside the tubular fabric, so that the tubular fabric is going to be get optimal tension, and after that the fabric is going to be taken with the help of take up or take down rollers. Okay, and you can see this is the overall how the fabric is coming and how this is going to be forwarded to the cloth winding mechanism. Okay, so these are the few images, and the next component is, that is drive. Okay, mechanical drives and electrical drives. Already we have discussed in the last session, that is in the single jersey weft knitting machine, that is single bed circular weft knitting machines already we have discussed. There is a mechanical type of driving mechanism and there is an electrical type of driving mechanism to wound the cloth into the cloth roll. Okay, so next, the second category, that is double cylinder category. So till now what we have discussed is we have discussed about the cylinder and dial category. Cylinder and dial category. So in the cylinder and dial category, so how the cylinder needles are fixed on the cylinder and how the needles on the dial is going to be fixed and what is the operation, how the fabric is going to be formed. Okay, we have seen in these particular previous slides. So now we will see the third category, that is double cylinder machines. Double cylinder machines. Nothing but two cylinders are there. Okay. So in the cylinder and dial case, the cylinder is like this and dial will be like a small plate, horizontal plate which is placed above the cylinder. But in the case of double cylinder machines, we have two cylinders. We are going to use two cylinders to manufacture the fabrics of single jersey as well as the purl structures. Single jersey as well as the purl structures. So in case of cylinder and dial category, we can produce rib structures and interlock structures. And by using the double cylinder category, we can able to produce purl structures as well as the single jersey fabrics even. Okay. So we will see that what is and how these double cylinder work machines are going to be worked and what are the main components. Remaining everything, feeders and the fabric take-up mechanism, everything is common, but only the knitting element zone, knitting zone is very important to know about the idea of how these double cylinder knitting machines are going to work. Okay, so you can see here double cylinder circular knitting machines are made up by a base whose central zone houses two cylinder needle beds positions. Okay, vertically at the angle of 180 degrees. Nothing but one cylinder is like this, and again in the top side one more, at the top side one more cylinder is going to be placed. So you can see that in 180 degrees of angle, nothing but in the same axis, same angle, one above the other. So that is why the two needle beds are called lower needle bed and upper needle cylinder, or upper cylinder or lower cylinder. Okay, so two needle circular needle beds are going to be used. Two circular needle beds are going to be used. That is why it is called as double cylinder machines. Okay, now you can see here the image is showing that in between the two beds, the bed one is top bed, upper bed, and lower cylinder, upper cylinder and lower cylinder. In between that we are going to feed the yarn to the particular position of the needles. Now, so how these needles are going to be operated? What is the operation of, what is the operating procedure of the needles which are present in the cylinder and the two cylinders are? We will see that. So you can observe here the needles are arranged in opposite grooves. In opposite grooves. So both the cylinders are having grooves. So these are two opposite groups, cylinder of upper cylinder and cylinder lower cylinder. So both the grooves are in the same axis, it is there. So the needle is going to operate in between these two grooves of opposite grooves of the two cylinders. Okay, now the double latch needles have no butts. So you need to remember, so double cylinder category we are going to use double latch needles. Nothing but two sides of the needle we have a latch. Two sides of the needle we have a latch. There is no butt in the needle. There is no butt in the needle. So both the sides of the needle we have a latches. So you need to understand, by in the case of double cylinder category we are going to use double latch needles. Double latch needles, and there is no butt in the needle. So therefore external element is required to control the needle movement or needle drive. Okay, so the formation of loops in between the two cylinders, so the needle has to move right up and down, or so it has to be moved. So there is an external drive is required. So what is that is called as the slider. So the external drive movement or drive is called as the slider. So there is a slider which is going to be used to operate the needles in between the two cylinders. So the machine incorporates two series of sliders. Okay, one is for the position of lower cylinder and the another is positioned in the upper cylinder. Both series are driven by cams. So these slides are going to be driven by the cams. Okay, but upper cylinder is having the slider, one slider, and the second one is having in the lower slider. Okay, so lower cylinder and upper cylinder both are having the sliders. Okay, and you can observe that the slider, what are the different parts in the slider is. So slider top, hook and drive butt, transfer butt we have. So all these are the parts of the slider. We will see how this is going to be operated in the actual condition, in particularly double cylinder category, to transfer the loop or to produce the new loops, okay, using a old loop. So before going to that particular thing, can you remember that what is exactly the pulse structure is? So we have already discussed, like a rib is nothing but alternative wales are phase loops, and this particular category, that is pearl structures, alternative courses are phase loops. Alternative courses are phase loops. Alternative for courses nothing but course 1 phase loops, course 2 back loop, course 3 phase loop, course 4 back loops. So how it is going to be moved? So there is a loop formation process, there is a change in the loop formation process. So first time the old loop, through the old loop, it is taking from the left side to the right side. The formation of new loop is going to be occurred from the left side to the right side, and in the second course from the right side to the left side. So again, if you want to produce this kind of structure, basically like you should have a loop transfer system, or you should have a double needle hooked system. Double latch needle hook system is required. So we are using this double needle, so double latch needles we are using to produce the pearl kind of structure. Even if you want single jersey, you can manufacture the single jersey fabrics by using the double latch needles. Okay, so this is how the stitch formation is going to be occur. So and needle transfer is going to be occur. Okay, so upper cylinder as well as the lower cylinder is there, and in between that there is a needle, and there are two sliders which are used for, one is for the upper cylinder and one is for the lower cylinder. So these sliders are going to operate the needle. So how this is going to be operated? So just we'll see a small animation video on how this is going to be operated. Okay, so you can observe that there is a needle, so there is no butt in the needle, there are sliders one side and it is released and it was transferred. Then so you can observe that particularly the loop transfer or particular courses, course 1 is facing one side, course 2 is facing other side, phase loops, back loops, course 1 phase loop, course 2 back loop, course 3 phase loop, course 4 back loop, like that. So now there is a slider usage. So by using the slider we are going to manufacture the pearl kind of structure. If you want to produce single jersey, then only one slider will work in the one particular cylinder. So only you can produce the single jersey, whether it is all the phase loops at one side. So the single jersey fabrics also can be possible in the particular category. Okay, so this is how we are going to produce the pearl structures by using the double latch needles and the slider mechanism. So double latch needles with slider mechanism, we are going to produce the pulse structures as well as the single jersey fabric structures. And whatever the steps I have explained, I have given here. The step 1, the double latch needle is locked by the slider on the lower cylinder and start rising, driven by the butt of the slider. Okay, so butt of the slider is having the butt, so not the latch. So latch is not having any butt, so slider is having a butt. So this butt is going to engage the one side of the hook of the needle, so that it is going to be operate for making the loop formation through the mold. Okay, so this is the second step. The needle is reaches a position that allows the slider of upper cylinder to lock its head. Okay, after locking, the needle is taken by the upper cylinder, is released from the slider of the lower cylinder. Okay, then after that, the needle is transferred to the upper cylinder. The thread fed by the thread guide is received under the hook. Okay, so till this session, particularly this session, we have discussed about the two knitting machines, that is double bed knitting machine, double bed weft knitting machines. So in the double bed weft knitting machines, again we have discussed about two categories. One is called as cylinder and dial category, and the second one is called as a double cylinder category. Okay, so in the next sessions we will see that what is exactly the technological evolution has been taken place in the weft knitting or knitting, circular knitting category, and as well as what are the different types of jacquard mechanisms and mechanisms or multi-butt needles, how we are going to use. We will discuss in the further sessions. Till then, thanks for listening. Bye.